Oliver's podcast Beyond the Gavel, and today we are back with another interesting topic that we thought would be fitting for our times, especially these times that we're living in, and also would be interesting to talk about and discuss, but from our perspective and for our audience. Today I have with me Abhinav. Hello, Abhinav.
Hi.
And today we're going to be discussing the topic of war, but not too deep, but from our perspective, what we think about war, what we think are the causes, and how we as teenagers should be dealing with the news that we receive, and how we should be dealing with the criticisms, maybe, or maybe these situations. You know how it is. So, Abhinav, what
Yeah.
is your definition of war?
I think war is basically conflict between two people, like two entities. So it could be nation, it could be state. I think war is when you're fighting over something. Like for example, most wars are over land. Some are for a resource like oil, and some are against the terrorism. I think war is just a way to get what you want, but through violence.
And you said it's a way to get what you want, but is it often that people really get what they want after
No,
wars?
most of the times they end up losing more than they get, as after all, the value of a human life exceeds anything that you can find underground.
Yeah, that's a good definition. But from my perspective, it's just like a way where people try to prove something, but they just fail to. Like
Hmm.
it is a way to get something that you want, and sometimes they succeed at doing that, and sometimes, or most of the times, they don't because you are sacrificing something for another. You're sacrificing your people, the army, the
Yeah,
resources, get land, for example. Maybe some countries start wars to get land or like a piece of land or something, or to show dominance over a specific area
hmm.
or something.
Or to
But
spread an idea.
like I said, there is a loss on both sides. So, and there's a very good or a beautiful saying, and also an infamous one, which goes like, "There's no winner in wars."
Yeah, that's true.
And from our perspective as teenagers, I mean, first of all, the first thing we should realize is that we don't have the tool, or we don't have the power to make change. We don't have the power to force opinions or things like that on other people or something like that. But all we have right now is, and especially in these times that we live in, we got social media, we got group chats, these, we got TVs, we got a lot of sources for information. So there should be like a specific way where we receive those news and process them and also share them with the people if we have our own platforms to share.
Yeah, like if you look at many recent conflicts right now, there's a lot of misinformation being spread online. With like like this happened, we down this fighter jet, we destroyed this base. So there's a lot of misinformation going around in the internet right now over many conflicts, and there's like no one country to blame. All countries now are trying to spread their own agenda to make it seem like they're the ones who are winning the war, not the other nation. So what you should do is look from a neutral perspective, not from one country or another country's side, to know what's really going on.
Exactly, and on a personal level, war can shape a lot of people's personalities and the way they grow up, the way they get to live for the rest of their lives, especially if they deal with it at a young age. Don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. Like, for example, if your father is a soldier, you'll always have a patriotic sentiment in you. But then
Mm.
like, if this father again goes off to war and then he doesn't come back, it's always gonna leave a sour taste. Like, let's always gonna make you have a certain level of anger towards the country that your father fought against. So, like, war builds patriotism, but sometimes this patriotism could be a bit too much. Like the sentiments that you develop might be hurtful to other people. Like for example, nowadays in a lot of countries they're attacking like different religions over war. So like this could affect like society as a whole.
And sometimes you don't have to live in that world to, like, sometimes receiving the news can make you develop hatred, like
Yeah.
towards a specific people. Like you start to hate these people for no reason, just because of these news that you receive, things you see on the TV and the propaganda and stuff. But we're not going to dive deep into that. Now, if we get to discuss the causes of war, Abhinav, from my point of view, there are like some different causes sometimes, as we mentioned previously. So maybe it is to get what you want. Maybe it is to force dominance, force power on a specific group of people. What do you think are other reasons for war?
I think another one could be spreading an agenda. Like if you look in
Mm.
like back in history, like there were many crusades done to spread religion to to regions, right? So that could be a reason. Another reason could be on terrorism, like maybe a certain group like a certain group attacked your nation, so then you respond with your own fire at them. So sometimes it doesn't mean nation, it could be nation organization as well.
Or history, for example. Maybe sometimes history can also influence actions when it comes to these wars. Like we own this land 1,000 years ago, and now we weren't going to take it back, or something like that.
Definitely.
Do you think misinformation could also be a reason?
100%. Like in Myanmar, there was a genocide over some Facebook messages, if I remember correctly. Um,
Yeah, but see, on a global level, I don't think misinformation can be like a very valid reason.
yeah,
Maybe on
because
a maybe if we're talking about like two groups of people or
hmm,
two tribes, maybe if we're talking about like a civil war, for example, maybe if misinformation could be a good reason.
yeah, because nations aren't stupid, right? They have their own intelligences and all that. So like, what's being spread on social media won't affect them. After all, because they know way more than we do about what's going on in the world, right? So I don't think misinformation is like a major factor, but it could definitely play a small role.
Hmm. Exactly, and also benefits like maybe this country is showing dominance over this specific area, and that area is beneficial for me and my allies at the same time. So that also could be a reason or a cause of war. Now, you see, like misinformation is a very good point that we need to bring up, especially that we receive our news nowadays from social media. Newspapers sometimes can be true and can be not, but that also depends on when you're living. How should we treat those kind of information that we receive? How should we adjust them first? How should we look at them? I think.
A lot of like news agencies right now, they work more on sensationalism than actual journalism. So like I think you should first like you should wait for the nation's confirmation, because countries can't lie. Countries won't lie as much as the reporters. Like if you look at many broadcasters nowadays, they'll say whatever they want for the sake of entertainment. Like they're hunting for ratings, not for realism, right? So
Mm,
definitely don't trust them. Like take what they say with a pinch of salt, but then don't believe what people are saying on social media unless it's coming from verifiable source, right? It's like how for reports we don't use Wikipedia, we use like Britannica and all that, right?
mm.
So I'd say rely on reliable sources.
Reliable sources and also fact checking is a very important thing we should be doing.
100%.
Checking facts and trying to like put yourself in the other side's perspective. Well, this actually makes a lot of sense. If we say like my country here is trying to do this and that, does it make a lot of sense? Is what they're doing sensible? And what should we do? And if I was in the other country's place, what would I do? That's some questions you should ask yourself before what when you receive the news to fact check them and also deal with that. And scrolling too much to social media can sometimes be a negative thing, especially when you get to see a lot of other countries' perspective when you scroll through social media. If we're talking about TikTok, Instagram, especially, and Twitter or X, they call it nowadays, you get to see other countries' perspectives. But sometimes people often tend to spread lies, and people often tend to try to like create or make it, spread the tension between two different groups. It's often to find people like that.
Yeah, especially at our age, like what we see on social media like tends to have an effect on our entire psyche. Like what we think about like the world. Like we're all influenced by what we see, be it listening to Andrew Tate yap about being a man or whatever. Like so, like even these sentiments that are being spread online can also influence how you look at the world. For example, if there's this person that's spreading a lot of hate speech against a certain group or certain nation, you could you could tend to agree with it and maybe make it your personality that yeah, these people, all of these people are bad, there's nothing good about them, blah blah blah. So like what you should do is you should always look at things from two sides, not just one. Look at things from the
Mm.
person who's saying the things side, and look at the perspective of those who's being said against, so that you know what's right. Because a lot of people nowadays are very one dimensional, right? They believe what they see on Facebook or Instagram, and they just spread it. So what you should do is you should be smarter. You shouldn't listen to what they're saying, but then you should do your own research and find out what's true and what's not.
Abhinav, now let's talk about the main sources of education, the main sources or the educational institutions. Do you think schools and educational institutions are focusing or like spreading the right message when it comes to wars? Do you think are they doing enough work when it comes to like preventing such creating such tension between two different groups, for example?
I mean, most schools don't tend to go into such deep topics usually, right? They just tend to focus on like teaching the student what they're meant to be taught, and that's about it. Some schools do try to, because many schools nowadays they try to be very secular. They don't try to spread any agenda. But then again, they
Mm,
don't talk a lot about what's right, what's wrong. They just like stick to the small parts, like respect this person's rights, blah blah blah, and all that. Like war isn't usually a topic that comes up a lot in classrooms, in my experience at least.
mm. And also, we maybe we could move from school into our homes, which is our like the main place or the place where you get to spend most of your time. Families. Some families tend to avoid such topics. Some families speak about it openly next to the TV when the father, for example, is watching the TV. They get to talk about the topic next to their children, and sometimes they get to pass down those ideas to generations
Yeah.
because they don't try to even put some effort into like avoiding such topics, speaking about such topics next to the children. Do you think parents should be more aware when it comes to this?
I mean, I think a lot of parents, like from their childhood, like they grew up with a different mindset than we do, right? So it's not only the parents. Even we should be like, we should also acknowledge the fact that they come from a different world than us. We come from the age of social media and all that, and they come from a time where all they knew about was what their parents told them. So what our parents tell us could be or could not be true, but what we should do is like we should acknowledge that fact, and we should verify what they're saying, make sure it's truthful. And I think parents should definitely keep an open mind nowadays, because in this society, to have only one, to think one way rather than the other, can lead to like a lot of problems.
Hmm. Besides families and besides schools, I think a tool of influence can also be seen through the making of movies, making of
Hmm.
music, also art, creativity, and protests. Sometimes those things can also influence somebody's opinion about war. There are some people who support war through movies and try to like create violence and more tension, and there
Yeah.
are some people who do the opposite by like trying to do peaceful protests by making movies about peace, about two countries having two maybe imaginary countries, and then they finally come to peace and war and and art and maybe poetry, music, all those things. I think it's quite interesting how some movies or how two different people can do such things. Like there's some people who support it and some people who go do the opposite of that. Do you think also the industry is doing enough when it comes to that? Apparently, from what I see, I mean, a lot of people try to spread peace and all, but do you think it's working? Do you see any results from that, from where you live, for example?
So like where I come from, there are a lot of movies that are very patriotic, like that are like pro-war, like like the conflicts that are happening over here, like they always they go against like what the other country is up to. So it's always
Mm.
about how like this how our country is beating the other country and all that. Like peace isn't usually like a big topic or like a big topic in movies nowadays. It's more about like planes dropping bombs here, dog fights and all that. So I think like Bollywood industry can definitely work on spreading the idea of peace more than violence, and like stop like reduce the hate, I guess, against certain people.
Exactly. Now we move to a different board where we talk about how do we deal with friends and fellows from other countries. Do you have? I personally have like a lot of friends from a lot of different places, a lot of different countries, where those countries happen to have different points of view, different perspectives, different stances where they stand when it comes to global conflicts and stuff. Personally, I don't like diving into conversations. Just same as we have spoken, some families try to avoid those things. I also, in my friendships, try to avoid these topics sometimes. And if we have to get into that conversation, we try to be respectful because, as we mentioned in the beginning of this episode, we as teenagers at this age have nothing to do with this. We don't have nothing except for our voices. And those forces should be put to use in a way where we try to spread peace, where we try to not create more tension than there already is, and we try to give a good image of ourselves and also the other country. Do you have any special experiences?
I
when it comes
mean,
to that.
like in my friend group, there's definitely a lot of varying, opinions, be it from girls or boys. So what we try to do is be respectful about it, because we acknowledge that everybody's different, everybody has their own opinions. So rather than fighting with it, we acknowledge it. I think that's something that everybody should be doing.
Exactly, but we're talking. What about online though?
Online, like online, there's so many other people, people who you wouldn't call friends. People just meet on, like, on the comment sections of, like, reels and all that. They all
Mm.
have certain, they all have their own ideologies, and many of them try to spread it. So what you should do is stick to your own beliefs. Don't be influenced by others. I think that's probably the only way, like, you can avoid getting propagandized in this economy.
Exactly. It's but on social media there's a lot of extremism, a lot of, and not only on these like on a local level. Even when we try to look other countries' perspective or other countries' stances, there's a lot of extremism out there, and there's a lot of varying opinions. As you said, some people agree, some people disagree, and some people try to force their opinion on a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of propaganda spread through these accounts where we find, or they try to spread misinformation or try to highlight a specific event in history to justify specific action or another. This country is doing this thing now because back in the day they did this and that. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and a lot of people tend to be influenced easily. So extremism is a very dangerous thing, don't you think?
Yeah, one hundred
And some
percent.
people are like, yeah, some
No,
people
no.
are too far deep into it. Especially, let's say, for example, somebody has grew up in a family that is extremist, a family that does not avoid talking about such topics next to their children, and now they have grown up into an adult or teenager our age. What you think this person should be doing at this time? How would
I
you
mean,
convince this person to avoid such thing?
see, like, people have the right to have their own, like, opinions and ideas, right? So, like, not
Mm.
only should, like, so we shouldn't stop them from having such ideas, because it's up to them what they believe, and where that takes them in the future. But what we should be doing is making sure that that guy's ideas don't affect us, and then we don't try to suppress his own ideas.
And also reminds me of something. You know, when we see like extremism, a lot of people take it as a joke. Do you think
Yeah.
war should be considered a joke? Like a lot of people just tend to spread this content and stuff, and they simply do it not because they align with somebody, not because their opinion aligns with something specific, but they just do it for fun.
I mean, see, war, I don't think is something that you should be joking about, because there are people's lives on the line. Like, because imagine if you're there fighting for your country, and then uh, 1 second you're running, the next second it's all over. So, like, I think we shouldn't be joking about war, because there are real lives at stake, not only from military but like civilians. Because if you look at many conflicts nowadays, they're attacking more civilian targets than military targets, which is honestly it's that's not right. So I don't think war is something we should be joking about, because war has consequences that could affect everybody.
And I think this hate that somebody could hold against someone or a specific group of people can have a lot of consequences on their journey or their career, for example. If
Definitely.
you think to like sign up for a specific college or apply for somewhere or a job or something, this can definitely influence the employer's decision towards having you there or not, or the educational institution. You think people should be more? I think people should be more careful when it comes to what they spread online, the news they share,
100%.
their comments, the things they like on social media, and the things they talk about in conversations, the activities they also participate in real life. Some people go to protests and stuff. This is something we as teenagers, especially at a stage like this, should be very careful about because we have a long life ahead of us going into bigger, higher education institutions. What you think?
I mean, people will all, like, no matter what you do, there will always be people who are spreading extremist ideologies, right? So, like, I think it's less about the person spreading it; it's more about us. Like, we should
Mm.
be the ones who are resilient to such ideas and thoughts. We should be able to we should be able to differentiate between what's, like, what's appropriate and what's not. Because there's so many people out there who are blinded by their own thoughts, like, blinded by other people who are spreading agendas. And sadly, we can't do anything about them. They'll continue to say what they're saying, right? So all we can do is make sure that we're not one of them.
Exactly. Let's move to another point. I just got about it. there's a difference between patriotism and nationalism. What do you think that difference is?
I mean, I think patriotism is like more about like just showing love to your country, whereas nationalism is more like you think only your country is like the you think your country is the best one in the world. You think your country what it's doing is right. Like no matter what they do, it's like a it's like extremism in a national perspective, I guess.
Hmm.
What about you?
I think about loving your country, but still having the ability to answer it. Still having the or still questioning it. That's what I actually asked this question to ChatGPT over here, and I said, "What's the difference between patriotism and nationalism?" Patriotism is loving your country while still being able to question it. While nationalism is or often means my country is better than yours, no matter what, no question asked.
Yeah, and in this article I read recently, like let's move on from this topic. I
Mm,
read that war has actually helped us progress as a society. Like
mm.
like while making like to make better weapons, we've discovered things like Bluetooth, wireless in the internet, and all sorts of stuff, right? So like, do you think war has upsides, or do you think this is just a consequence?
Again, would you read the question?
like because of war we have a lot of technologies, right? If we went for World War II, we wouldn't have the technologies we have now. So do you think wars actually further society, or do you think this is just a random consequence?
Hell, a lot of bad consequences. It's the same as the First World War. The same as the second one. If we happen to, if a third one happens right now, I think third one would just be more destructive than that. The weapons have become more powerful. People, the news spread faster than ever. People sometimes get shocked by simply checking the news. They don't have to even experience that. A lot of destruction will happen. A lot of damage. And seeing how far people have come or technology have come nowadays, it's only scary to think what we haven't been exposed to yet. Like
Hmm.
the technology, the things that we see right now is not everything these countries have. If you think about it, like
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that we don't even know about. Like you can only imagine. It's gonna be crazy, man.
Hmm. And also nowadays a lot more wars are happening on the internet than on actual ground. Like you have cyber attacks from one country or another, North Korea attacking this country, yada yada. So like, do you think cyber attacks should be considered as acts of war?
Cyber attacks. See, when you bring cyber attacks, I think this always reminds me of the Cold War, for example.
Hmm.
Even though the Cold War happened in the 80s or the early 80s, I don't think digital things were involved in that war, but it's not something that you see on the public. Nowadays, we are living in a Cold War. We are living in a war where people fight over the markets. For example, we're not going to mention any specific countries, but two countries can fight over economy, for example. Economic war, they call it. So economic war is
Trade
a different
wars.
form of Cold War, and at the same time, digital war can, like, for example, not be a physical one, but it is an effective one.
Hmm.
Stealing data and and all those things, manipulation, and all this propaganda that you see nowadays on the social media, that is a part of the war. It is influencing the people because one of the stages, if like I've read or I've watched a lecture of a Soviet man from the Soviet Union back, and I think an interview was done in the 80s. He said one of the steps, if you want to take down a country, one of the steps that he mentioned was demoralization.
Hmm.
Can affect a country by simply affecting the people first, making them think that their country is not the best, their country is not. So manipulation and spreading propaganda is very effective. Is a very effective tool.
Definitely. I think like at times of war, like you definitely have to, like don't be affected like by what's happening. Like you stick with your beliefs. Like you think your country is like you keep your faith in a nation, because the first step to like as you said, the first step to losing a war is to losing faith in the country.
Mm.
Hmm.
Lose your faith at the same time. Don't. If I mean, yeah, you can. When we try to explain the difference between patriotism and nationalism, you should be patriotic. Yes,
Yeah,
love your country. But if you feel like your country is not going in the right direction, that doesn't mean that you should just support it
you
just
should voice
because
your
of that.
concerns.
But yeah, watch your concerns and also support the people because after all, I don't care what country you belong to, you are a human. Those
Hmm.
people live just as much as you do, and trying to go in the opposite direction and support the oppressive person. I don't think that's the right thing to do. Overall, one last point we need to talk about is how we should be, or let's talk about what we should be doing besides using our voices. You know, our voices are effective for sure, but what's something else you think teenagers should be doing at this stage of their lives?
I think if we're not watching our concerns, we should, say, because there are a lot of extremist ideologies out there, and what you should do is you should be keeping your own head. Like, you shouldn't let others affect you. You should be independent and strong, right? Because your beliefs are yours. You can't let them be affected by others.
Exactly. At this stage, we are not the presidents. We don't have the chance to make any change or give any decision, but we have our own voices, and those voices should be used correctly. If you go on a stage, for example, don't try to promote violence. Don't try to do that. Even if that stage allows you to like use your voice against violence and stuff, you shouldn't be doing that. Like I said, be patriotic, but don't be a national or the opposite. Is it? No. Yeah, love your country, but also be brave enough to question it. And sometimes you should just keep your tongue to yourself, I feel.
Yeah.
One last take episode is that loving your country doesn't mean you're silent, doesn't mean you're silence, or you should silence your voice. True patriotism is choosing your homeland every day, not because it's perfect, but because you believe it can be better. Always try to strive for the better. Always try to seek a better world to live in. Because standing with the oppression is only going to result in those people. If your country wins this war, okay, that's fine. But that's also mean there's a lot of your brothers, sisters, people, a lot of innocent people have died, and therefore you can't say that you have exactly won the war because we lost our value as humans in this case. After all, you don't belong to this country or that one. You are a human after all.
Yeah. I think with this beautiful message, we should conclude the episode. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We hope the messages that we've spoken about here have helped you understand on what we as teenagers can do with the war. And with this is me and Nasser signing off.